argument. This is mere rhetoric. The horse sequence has proved vexed to everyone who looks at it, and the term of choice is that it's an astonishingly bushy sequence. We don't
Please
know.
Please explain the problem. I'm waiting for the answer.
When you look at
what
the
a bushy sequence is.
Yeah, this is a term that's occurred very often in literature. When we look at the horse sequence, we have dozens and dozens of species entering the record suddenly and departing from the record suddenly, just as abruptly as they entered. We do not really know whether the modern horse has ancestral patterns with the dozens of other species that we find in the fossil record.
So what that means is that you hold open... Sure, go ahead.
If we look closely at some of the amazing structures, for example, we find it very difficult, we find it very difficult to find specific antecedents. The more we study such structures, the less plausible it is that they have an ancestral pattern.
Let me suggest to the audience that what Dr. Berlinski just said is in fact not correct. And I can recommend articles and books in which you can find not only a series of transitional forms, but also good evolutionary morphologic explanations for it. And here's the question that I have for you. Once again, to someone who advocates, another question, to someone who advocates intelligent design.
I don't.
The fact, to someone who advocates intelligent design, does the sequence of these organisms in the fossil record simply mean that the intelligent designer was incompetent, he kept making things and they went extinct, or that he was restless, I try this, I'll try that, I'll try the other thing, or does it mean that in fact these organisms are related with by descent with modification?
No idea. I mean, it's not a question I'm prepared to answer one way or another. I don't see why I'm obliged to answer that. I'm coming here under the large tent of objurgation. I find scientific flaws with the Darwinian theory. I don't have a replacement.
Okay. The point that I think is extremely significant is in this case, one side argued from authentic evidence and the other side said it's not enough to convince me. And I think that's a good way to end the discussion.
All right. Thank you very much, Buckley. Closing arguments. Closing arguments. First, Lynn, closing for the opposition.
Well, I hope that our side at least has done what I promised we would do from the beginning, and that is we have asked for alternative explanations for evolution, and we have gotten none. What have we gotten? Well, we have Mr. Berlinski, who has literally moments, seconds ago, said he doesn't really have an alternative. We asked Mr. Behe. He said, well, a lot of people would say it was God, but we're not quite sure, I'm not sure at least, whether he's prepared to say it's God with any sense of authority. Mr. Johnson says, well, I don't know about the biblical answers as an alternative. We'll work that out after we debunk evolution, which I think will be some time from now. We've made it clear that evolution is not a philosophy, it's not a religious idea, it's not an ideology, it's the best, indeed, it's the only scientific explanation for the fact that there is change in the natural order. We asked about intelligent design, and got, I think, the best answer from Mr. Behe. Mr. Behe has, of course, compared, like it or not, compared the extraordinary complexity of the human cell to the mousetrap. He said, if we look at that mousetrap, it was created by a human. In fact, Mr. Miller improved on it, as you saw earlier tonight. Therefore, if that's complicated, then indeed the cell must also have been designed by an intelligence. And as I thought about it tonight, it's a little bit, we were all talking about nature analogies. It's a little bit like looking at a mole build a molehill. We say, that's very interesting. Then we walk out in the woods the next day and we notice a big mountain off in the distance. We say, good grief, that's enormously large. A really big mole must have built that. The truth of the matter is, it's not logical. We should be looking for different forces that result in different things. Your mousetrap was built by human hands because its components are inanimate objects. Cellular life is living, vibrant, breathing, changing matter. You're not just comparing apples to oranges, you're comparing plastic apples to organic oranges. And I think, therefore, this analogy fails. Let me close by saying, and speaking only for myself, because we do have a difference of religious opinion, I draw upon a scriptural passage which is dear to both Mr. Johnson and to myself. It comes from the first chapter of John's Gospel. It reads, in the beginning was the Word. Indeed, that word just might turn out literally to have been a command. Evolve. Thank you very much.
Mr. Chairman, ladies and gentlemen, I compliment the negative on the way in which their arguments have been framed. What is it that we set out to say here? Namely that the notion of creation has not been invalidated by whatever loyalty is shown to the idea of evolution. That is to say, we have used the word intelligent design in order to reach for something that is not biblical in dimension, but nevertheless suggests that the miracles with which we are familiar are most probably miracles that didn't happen simply by chance. I think we all have reason to celebrate, in effect, the repudiation of materialist explanations that have been so studiously observed by our eloquent adversaries. So let me just close by reading one paragraph from an essay written 20 years after Darwin. In 1864, there was a diocesan conference at Oxford. They had chanced at this time to be in the neighborhood a man who was neither priest nor scientist, a man given to absurd freaks of intellectual charlatanry, yet showing at times also such marvelous and sudden penetration into the heart of things as would come only to genius. It was Disraeli. He began in his usual affected manner, slowly and rather pompously, as if he had nothing to say beyond perfunctory platitudes, and then, turning to the presiding officer, he uttered one of his enigmatic and unforgettable epigrams. What is the question now placed before society? The question is this: is man an ape or an angel? I, my lord, am on the side of the angels. The audience, not kindly disposed to the speaker, applauded the words as a jest. They were carried the next day over the whole land by the newspapers. They have often been repeated as an example of Disraeli's brilliant but empty wit. I suspect that beneath their surface glitter and hidden within their metaphor, these words contain a truth that shall someday break to pieces the new philosophy which Huxley spent his life so devotedly to establish.
Thank you, Mr. Buckley. Well, I'm glad that's settled. I'd like to thank our debaters, and I'd like to thank Seton Hall University, and I'm not going to tax anyone with my voice any longer. I apologize for that. And I guess we'll know in a few million years who's right and who's wrong about this. Thank you very much.